Thanks for joining us in the Green Room from the Heritage Foundation. I'm Rob Bluey, and today we're joined by Congressman Darrell Issa. He's chairman of the Oversight and Government Reform Committee in Congress and the author of a bill to fix the Postal Service. Congressman, thanks for joining us at Heritage today.
Well, thanks for having me on, and thanks for giving me an opportunity both live in the theater and now to talk about the need to right-size the post office, to make it the size for the needs of the American people.
Now, why is this something that needs to be done immediately? What's the crisis we're facing today?
Well, there's an old expression, if you're in a hole and you want to get out of it, first stop digging. We are digging a $10 billion a year hole. We're losing that much. So when you have a $65 billion industry, it's losing $10 billion. You can take as long as you want to reform it, but you're going to have to pay off that debt. I don't think anyone wants us to have 20 or 30 or 40 billion more dollars of debt at the time we fix the post office. We fix it now, it starts making a small profit. We can go on for many years delivering service to the American people.
Now, you've been a successful businessman in the private sector. What reforms would you put into place to address some of the problems that we're facing today?
The real reforms for the post office are get efficient vehicles, get efficient distribution centers. They have way too many of them. Have sufficient post offices to meet the needs of the post office and the people that they're going to serve. If somebody wants a building in their backyard that doesn't have a need, let them have the building, but get it from being a post office facility that's part of overhead. Recognize that most Americans receive their mail near their front door, down the street in a box. Well, a few get them walked all the way up and stuck in a chute. That's costing us $5.5 billion excess to give that level of service to a small minority. You take all of those savings in efficiency, reduce the size of the labor, have the new facilities, less facilities, but what you need, and the post office can make a $2 or $3 billion profit next year. We just have to be willing to do that, including the right number of workers.
Now, we heard today after your speech during the Q&A, critics say that your plan is going to put more people out in the street looking for work. Your response to that?
Well, first of all, we believe that we'll be putting retirees into retirement. Some of them will end up working at other jobs. And by the way, they only have to make 20 or 25% of what they're making now in order to have the same or greater money between their retirement and their new job. So we're doing perhaps them a favor in that they'll be making the same or more. We'll be doing ourselves a favor because we'll be saving wages we don't need to be paying. And yes, it does mean there'll be 200,000 people who will either be retired or doing other work in addition to their retirement. But that's what Americans are dealing with. Americans do not get to keep a job just because they work for the government. The private sector doesn't have that. If there's a slowdown at General Motors, you're out on the street waiting to come back when times are better. In the case of the post office, this slowdown is permanent.
How does your proposal compare to the one advocated by the White House?
Well, the White House is looking at a simple reform of kick the can down the road except for 6-day delivery, make it 5-day. Well, quite candidly, I don't want to dictate that they have less service. I want to dictate that they have sufficient service and do it more efficiently. So the White House's solution might occur. The postmaster might go from 6 to 5. But let's have that be done by postal professionals trying to deliver high service, high demand, and do it at a break even.
And now finally, the Constitution does mention the Postal Service. Have you taken that into context when you've put forward your reforms?
Well, absolutely. The post office is mentioned just as the various Indian nations are mentioned. But the Constitution doesn't say what the contract will be with the Indian nations. It doesn't say how we will organize our post offices. And our reform is a reform of right-sizing the post office. It does not substantially in any real way change how we do business with those federal employees. As a matter of fact, before 1963, there were no unions, so there were no union contracts with postal workers. So going back to the Constitution, you'd be able to right-size the post office with federal workers in days, not in decades the way we have been.
Congressman Issa, thanks for joining us at Heritage.
My pleasure.
For the Heritage Foundation, I'm Rob Bluey.